Happy Valentine's Day. Welcome back to my channel. Today, as I promised in my several most recent videos, I will be doing a vlog form of a blog post which I wrote in August 2016 because Valentine's Day is my Duran-iversary. The day I became a Duranie, I realized I had fallen in love with Duran Duran, who is the most unlikely band on my list of favorite bands because I'm all about classic rock and pop from the classic top 40 era, about 1955 through 75. But I've always had a nostalgic love for bands of the 80s and very early 90s because that was my childhood decade, even though that doesn't really fit with the type of musical style I really like. So it was a giant surprise when I fell in love with this band. So let's just get in with this essay I wrote on my blog, and of course, as always, I'll be fleshing it out a little bit. And I had written that post for and actually this is a real holiday, believe it or not, Duran Duran Appreciation Day, which is on August 10th every year. It's a fan-initiated holiday, and it falls on the anniversary of lead singer Simon Le Bon's near-drowning experience in 1985. He was his yacht turned over in a race, and he was caught up in a bunch of ropes, and he really thought he was about to die. And Baruch Hashem, thank God he managed to survive and bless us with many more decades of wonderful music. Who knows how music history would have turned out if God forbid he had been killed that day. And you can see I'm wearing this vintage pin which I bought. I believe it was in Saratoga, a record store which unfortunately is no longer in existence, but they still do have a branch of this record store as far as I'm aware in Albany, New York. I believe this pin was from about 1982, judging by the hairstyles and the clothing. Unfortunately, I didn't buy any of the other vintage pins they had there by the checkout counter. They were only $1 or $2, so I could have had a lot more cool vintage pins to add. And these are also some other pins I've put on my jacket. They were originally on the back of my backpack, but I didn't want to break the pins on them. They're just really cool things, and I originally had more pins on my backpack, but for whatever reason I'm just not wearing them, or the pins broken. They still need fixing. So anyway, for the blog post I wrote, I decided to finally share the story of how I became a fan, because it happened in Valentine's Day of 2011, but I had never actually put down the fandom story in words, despite mentioning my love for the band in many previous blog posts and such. It's hard to believe this year makes 11 years already. Where did all that time go, and did I really get that old already? My path to fandom wasn't the typical one, since it happened so many years after their greatest wave of popularity. I wasn't some screaming teeny bopper, and I've always most gravitated towards classic rock and pop, as aforementioned. To quote their lesser known song, Beautiful Colors, which is really, really lovely and beautiful, I encourage you guys to check it out. Life isn't standard issue, it's customized. Not everyone has the same reasons for joining and staying in a fandom. I also like to discover bands, books, films, actors, writers, etc., long after the heyday has passed. And obviously, I frequently have the exact opposite reaction of the crowd for books and movies and bands and such, with massive amounts of hype to them. So that's why I kind of steer clear of things everyone's all squealing about. And if I do get into them, it's long after their greatest wave of popularity, and I'm getting into them for my own reasons, not because of the massive hype at all. I actually bought Rio in July 2007 after finding it in the $2 stacks at a Northampton record store, and this is vinyl I'm talking about, not CD. Unfortunately, that store has also gone out of business since. At the time, I justified it to myself as indulging my 80s nostalgia, a guilty pleasure I only had to part with $2 for, which is the same reason I bought a few other 80s records later. I listened to the album a few times, but it didn't do much for me. It wasn't the right time for me to become a fan. Kind of embarrassed to admit this now, but for a long time I dismissed the band because I thought they were just a bunch of pretty boys who were only around in the 80s, just a talentless boy group for mindless teeny boppers, which of course I know now is completely false and insulting, but that's, genuinely what I believe. I'm sorry I felt that way, but, I did genuinely have that impression, and, we can't, apologize for wrong impressions we had, even if they were, incorrect. That's, just, our feelings and part of, how we used to think in the past. And I've never liked all the plethora of boy groups popping up when I was in my, late teens, early 20s, and I turned like 18 in like 97, so obviously this was like at the heyday of, TRL and all that, like In Sync and Backstreet Boys, although I have always had, a soft spot for the Backstreet Boys, I guess because they, were on the scene way before all these other, knockoffs and ripoffs, and they do seem like, a genuinely talented vocal group, and you can't really say the same thing for all the other, like, imitators and knockoffs that came after them. It's just, really not the same, and that's one big reason I hate the term boy band, because a vocal group is not a band. I'm sorry. They can be a very good vocal group, but they are not, a band, writing songs and playing instruments, and they're, I always think it's, kind of insulting to call these groups like bands or boy bands when they're clearly not bands, even though that might seem like a pedantic nitpick. Took a while for me to realize they're a real band, and just happened to be heavily marketed to teeny boppers, the way my beloved Monkees were a generation earlier, and I'll discuss like correlations between Duran Duran and the Monkees again later in this post. Real fans stuck around after their heyday, as I've since come to discover, while the fair weather fans moved on to the next big thing, pimped by the media. Like, what else is new? That frequently happens. A group or band gets really, really popular, or like a writer or actor or whoever, like all these, like, I hate to stereotype my own sex, but, it does frequently happen to be young girls and very young women who get into, like, whomever or whatever, like, and that as soon as the popularity passes, who cares about them anymore? Let's just swoon over the new thing. And people who actually genuinely liked, whoever, whatever, for genuine reasons, they will stick around, like, for that person or thing's, entire shelf life, or even after they're, no longer making music or acting or whatever, even gone to the next world, because they genuinely liked him or her, them, or whatever, for whatever reasons, genuine reasons, all along, and not just because of media hype. As some readers of my blog might remember, in November 2010, I finally went back to my long hiatus book, Little Ragdoll from Scratch and Memory, and I do have a vlog talking about some background story on that book, and I've mentioned it a bit in some of my other videos. So around this time, I seriously started using YouTube. I believe that's when I joined and made my account, and I began making playlists to listen to while writing. And unfortunately, many of these playlists have since been, kind of cut to shreds, because a lot of the videos on them were deleted for like copyright infringement of the music and the images, which is, really unfortunate, but I do listen to those songs now on Spotify. And by the way, I'm not going to cancel Spotify because some woke loons are having a snit fit. Sorry, not sorry. So anyway, one of these playlists on YouTube was my Hollies playlist. They're still one of my absolute favorite bands in my top 5. And that was my majority soundtrack for writing Little Ragdoll. I also made soundtracks for the Four Seasons, the Monkees, and several other bands and artists in the 80s. Of course, I searched out several Duran Duran songs for the Lattermost playlist, and ended up clicking on a lot of their other recommended videos. As 2010 turned into 2011, I found myself liking and listening to them more and more. I'd liked the band's official Facebook page by early 2011, since I remember there was a post celebrating the 30th anniversary of Planet Earth shortly after I joined, and believe it or not, that song was made in my lifetime, which makes me feel really old, although it was obviously released before I was old enough to remember. Then on Valentine's Day, the page asked about fans' choices for most romantic songs. A number of people named Come Undone as super romantic and baby-making music, and I looked up the video on YouTube. I ended up watching and listening to it over and over again, hooked. That's the song that really threw the switch and made me realize I was a real active fan, not just disinterestedly indulging 80s nostalgia. I consider it my Valentine's Day, my anniversary of becoming a Duranie, and can't really say the same for most of my other favorite bands. It was just, gradually realizing I loved them over time. There was no one specific date, oh, now, like, I really love this band, or now I, admit I like this band, and no longer just, disinterestedly listening to them whenever I hear them. During this early period, while watching their videos and listening to their songs, I found myself thinking, wow, the blonde dude, Simon, is really handsome. This was pretty noteworthy for me, because I'm almost never physically attracted to blondes. I mean, this is like my epitome of beauty for a man has always been really dark hair and eyes, Spanish, Mexican, Italians, Israelis, and I also love, the Slavic cheekbones and stuff, but I'm really not attracted to, blonde hair and blue eyes at all. That's like so like unusual for me. I always consider blonde hair and blue eyes a rather boring cliche look, and this is true for like women as well as men, although I'm like 100% like heterosexual, but like, when I notice a woman happens to be beautiful, she has, dark hair and dark eyes, just like when I'm physically attracted to a man or notice a man is like super physically attractive. A guy with those features, blonde hair and blue eyes, has to be really, really special for me to pay attention to him. And also, like, Roger Daltrey is among the other very, like, small number of men with blonde hair and blue eyes I consider very physically attractive. And he is, well, obviously now he does, like, kind of look his age, but for many, many decades he, like, had drank from the fountain of youth. He looked much younger than he really was. So on the 23rd of March, 2011, the band did a YouTube broadcast concert for American Express with a truly bizarre video work by David Lynch. Like, you can look this up yourself on YouTube. I believe probably like most of the videos are still there unless they've been rued for copyright infringement. There's a lot of like really goofy and weird, like surreal video choice, and I realized that's kind of his style, but it didn't really, fit with the songs or the band. It was just like a really weird combination. I was getting more and more into them and starting to feel really self-conscious about it. That summer, I began writing the first draft of the 12th Time, which is now in both ebook and hardcover. If you're interested in checking them out, I do obviously will be doing in future a video about like background information about the book and like summary and stuff itself. I often listen to them as my writing soundtrack. All the while, I felt weird when I caught myself listening to them too much. I didn't want to admit to myself I'd become a real fan and fallen in love with them so deeply, since I was afraid of being made fun of. Then I remembered, I've always cared less when people trash my beloved monkeys and accuse them of being only for shallow, brainless teeny boppers with poor taste in music. I know the real story behind their origins and evolution, and love their music no matter what. Sometimes good bands get famous really quickly and are heavily marketed to teeny boppers. As a result, they develop a stigma it can take decades to shake, and many people don't take them seriously as real bands. Why was I being such a hypocrite about loving a band with a similar story? And on my blog, if you're interested, you can check it out. I have, well, it was like many years in the past now, but I had, like, I believe it was like 4 or 5 part series called Good Bands, Fast Popularity, like Teeny Bopper Marketing, something like that, about when like good, genuine bands get famous really quickly and they just happen to be heavily pitched towards teeny boppers, and a lot of people, therefore, for many decades, it didn't really take them seriously, and then they finally like catch on and realize, oh, they were making like really good, like genuine music all along. We just didn't take them seriously because they have an image of only like screaming teen girls liking them. And among, obviously, I covered the Monkees and Duran Duran. I also covered Herman's Hermits, and I did the Beatles repackaging of their albums on Capitol Records, and I can't remember who else I did. And maybe there were only like 4 parts to it, but I think to remember I might have done a 5th thing for that as well. So I finally admitted to my head what my heart already knew, and no longer felt ashamed or self-conscious about how much of their music I was watching and listening to. So now, 11 years later, I'm not embarrassed to admit unfortunately, this is no longer true because, unfortunately, like as I've mentioned in many videos, like 99% of my belongings are in storage 900 miles away. That's a really long, infuriating story. But anyway, at the time I had written this post, I was sleeping under a vintage framed poster of the band, and then it was like really special to me. I really miss that poster, and God willing, it will be all of my things will be with me again soon. Even though my horrible little brother is like caring more about his girlfriend and her husband than his own freaking family, and doesn't want to ship my belongings back to me, unfortunately. And I'm obviously not embarrassed to go out with this vintage button on my jacket. It was also on a strap of one of my purses, for all really like thick strap. They call it like technically a crossbody bag, but I'm a tomboy. I don't care about like specific names of different types of purses. They're all purses to me. And obviously, and I don't think I ever had it on my backpack because of what had happened to my other pins I'd put on my backpack over the years. Like the weight against it just made the pin break, and I didn't want to risk that happening to something so precious and priceless, even if it might not be necessarily be worth a lot of money. Like it's priceless to me. My favorite member of the band is Roger. the drummer. Though on my giant stuffed frog who's out in the garage now, I'm not allowed to have him on my own bed because he's too big. Unfortunately, that's another infuriating story. And I named that giant frog Simon because I had already named my stuffed tiger, who unfortunately is also in storage with 99% of my belongings, after my first Roger, the handsome Roger Harry Daltrey, you know. So that's, and also have one of my flash discs looks like a tiger. His name is also Roger, after Roger Daltrey, because there is a line in the Who song, it's a cover like My Way, no, I was born a tiger, always had my way, and that's, you know, such a Roger Daltrey line. I've used lines from some of their lyrics as inspiration for chapter and part titles in my books. I don't believe I've mentioned that in any of my previous videos I've done in my books, and some narrative lines in general. And some of my favorite songs include like The Seventh Stranger, Secret October, Out of My Mind, Lonely in Your Nightmare, and To the Shore. And I did have two, last Duran Duran Appreciation Day on my blog. I talked about my 10 of my favorite music videos, and the 2 holidays before that I did, you know, one top 10 for my top 10 favorite songs, and the other was, you know, finishing out like the top 20 with 10 more of my favorite songs. And this year on the holiday I will be doing the finishing out the top 20 of my favorite music videos. So if you're interested, there's obviously links to my blog down in the description box, and you can check that out if you're interested. My favorite music video is the long version of Wild Boys, So Deliciously Macabre. And if you want to know how my mind works, my other 2 favorite music videos are Sledgehammer by Peter Gabriel and Land of Confusion by Genesis. You know, like, what kind of twisted mind do I have, you know? And of course, favorite songs, Come Undone, the song that made me come undone. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, even though it's a little bit different than the kinds of like things I usually discuss about. I mostly do booktube and authortube related content. Please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting, and such. I'm hoping to, you know, build a greater subscriber base so I can get to 100 subscribers. And I'm doing a series on Giovanni Boccaccio's classic work of medieval Italian literature, the Decameron. If I can get to 100 subscribers, I'm planning 105 videos for that series. I believe my next video will be on Wednesday. It'll be another of my Dantean posts. I believe I'll be doing a video form of a blog post I did called Misquoting Dante, which mainly concerns like probably one of the most famous fake Dante quotes. You probably will like recognize it when I say it in the video, and like also taking an example of like a quote he like really did say, but it's, you know, frequently taken out of context to make it look like it implies something much different than it actually did, in general lessons for like, you know, spotting fake quotes and putting quotes in proper context so you can like fully understand what they actually mean. So thank you very much again for watching. Happy Valentine's Day if you have a significant other, and if you don't have a significant other, you're like a spinster like I am, or just, you know, single, haven't met anyone special yet, you know, just enjoy, like, you know, have fun with yourself being single, and like, God willing, those of us who do want, you know, spouses and partners will like find our heart's desire, you know, sooner rather than later. Like, I've not given up hope yet that I will eventually have a husband and become a mother. So see you guys again very soon. Thanks. Bye.